Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Friday, August the 13th, 2021. And our top story today, we'll discuss end of life planning and some things you need to know. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Eliza Feller. She's Director of Advanced Planning for Saul Levinson and Brothers, Inc. Eliza, it's great to see you again. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Great to be here again. I look forward to a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, I want to focus our conversation. I know you are talking to customers on a regular basis, and I think you've got some lessons that we'll explore over the next two segments, next 14 or so minutes. Let's talk about advanced planning and what do clients say to you after they get through this process, or after, what do they say? Geez, I wish I would have done this sooner.
Yes, that is certainly something that we have heard. Really, the main thing that I hear is no matter how someone feels coming into the conversation, whether they are reluctant or hesitant or practical about it, or I hate to say looking forward to it, but really motivated to take care of things, no matter how they enter the conversation, at the end, everybody feels relief, and they are just grateful that it has taken something of a load off their shoulders and really helped them ease their concerns about what the final arrangements will be.
And do you think, just anecdotally, or maybe they tell you, are you seeing an increase of people who are doing this? And do you think it's directly related to maybe they had an experience through COVID, or maybe they had a family member or a friend of the family go through this and they said, look, I need to plan now?
Sure. Yes. It's all anecdotal at this point. I think as surveys are done going forward, we're going to see, I think, a big spike, a lot more people making appointments to make the arrangements. And lately, many more people choosing to prepay, choosing to make sure this is just all taken care of. Initially, it was concern, I think, a lot for themselves that COVID really pushed the issue, that they had been thinking of doing this at some point. And for a lot of people, they were really confronted with the potential of their own mortality. But in the past couple of months, I think, as we've seen things shift toward we thought it was over and we're not really sure what's going to happen going forward, is a lot more people recently have been saying they're seeing peers start to die. And it's frightening for them a lot of times unexpectedly. And that is motivating a lot of people to come make arrangements. Historically, that's been the case, but things seem to have been increasing over the past couple months.
And we'll talk about some of the documents in a minute, but are you seeing a younger population? I'm about to be 50. I'm confronted. I know I'm going to be on the back nine when it comes out, when I hit 50. Probably won't live past triple digits, although I'm hoping. But are you seeing a younger group of people recognize their mortality and say, I need a will, I need a medical directive, I need to really think about what I need to do on behalf of not just myself, because it's not going to matter to me, but my family, to put them in a good spot?
Yes, we are really seeing the average age of people make prearrangements. It is coming down. I think partly because of COVID, again, really pushing the issue for people, but also awareness about the entire concept of pre-planning. That in the past, I think there was a lot more of a sense that someone else will take care of that. And now, because of social media, advertising, et cetera, really putting the issue out there, and I think hopefully a shift toward an increase in conversations about death and everything that surrounds that, demystifying it, and really, making it much more of a conversation people are willing to have or understand the importance of, is driving that decrease in the average age.
Yeah, I think you're right, absolutely. Let's talk about some of these documents, I think, just to familiarize the audience, and some of them you may weigh in on, but some of them you may or may not. Let's talk about the medical directive. What is that? And how does someone go about doing a medical directive?
Yeah, so that's not done through us, but it is an incredibly important piece of end of life planning, is thinking a lot about how you want to live as you progress, as your health may change, where you want to live, and also as part of that, what kind of interventions you're comfortable with in terms of life support or, you know, medication versus if there's a terminal illness, do you prefer just comfort measures? And those are incredibly important conversations to have. Now, there are individuals who do help people through that conversation. A lot of states have resources online because many of the documents, they're legal documents, and they may differ from state to state.
Yeah. And what about determining or going through the process of figuring out, do you want to be in assisted living? Do you want to be independent as long as you can be? I mean, there are, and have home care. I mean, I would imagine that's a balancing act that people need to think about. If you're immobile,
Right.
if, how does that kind of work out?
I think that goes into the whole conversation of deciding not only what you feel strongly about, but also, again, as with anything else, taking into account who's going to be caring for you and what is the burden that's going to be on them. So clearly stating you want to be in a certain facility for a certain amount of time until, X thing happens, at which point you can be moved into another facility, is important, but making those decisions in a vacuum without talking to the people who will be actually having to bring in care or sort out round the clock aides if you're going to stay living independently, it's incredibly important to not just make that decision based on what you absolutely want in a perfect universe.
Let's talk about the will or the estate plan, and they're different documents, but that's another piece of this puzzle that I would think, just anecdotally reading articles, more and more people of a younger age saying, look, I should figure out where I want my stuff, whether it's money or, a piece of paper, my whatever, to go to somebody, right? Those are things that people are thinking about as well and need to get
absolutely
completed.
Yeah, and you can speak to this much more than I, but again, it really helps to make those decisions ahead of time in consultation with someone who specializes in this, an elder care attorney, an estate planner, because not only is it what happens with your stuff, but there can also be important decisions about how things are set up ahead of time based on tax implications and all sorts of concerns that a person may not think about or be aware of on their own. But it's about your legacy also, in a way, right? Do you want to give a certain pool of your money to a charity? Do you want all the funds to go to family members? How would that be divided up? Do you want to set some aside for someone's education? These are all really important considerations. And I think, at least I hope, people are thinking about that younger and younger. Just that awareness that this is so important to not just leave until a certain age.
Yeah, because you don't know what tomorrow brings, or even if you're guaranteed tomorrow. I guess last question for this segment, Eliza. There's so much social media, and we all have a digital footprint.
Right.
So that is actually an asset that has to be thought through, and many people are probably working through that. I know that's not an end of life or a funerary designation, but people need to think about that as well.
Yes, and we include that as part of our conversation here. We, in one of our resources, provide a place to list all of your digital assets, but also important passwords. So you want to make sure that someone, if you have Facebook, can go in and you can actually change a page over to be a memorial page instead of an active page. There are a lot of other things, and I don't recall if we've spoken about it before, but one of the things we encourage people to do is, because you don't know when you might die, but also when you might become hospitalized and someone else has to step in, maybe handle paying your bills. And I don't know about you, but we're mostly paperless. And I realized my husband would have trouble knowing what things I pay. I would have trouble knowing not only what things he pays, but also how to access them. If my name isn't on a particular thing, they're not going to let me pay a bill. So it is an incredibly important part of that planning.
Yeah, maybe when you said paperless, we are paperless, but we used to joke when I was a record keeper that we're paperless, not paper free. Eliza, I need to keep we used to print things out. I need to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll talk more about the pre-planning funerary process, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about how grieving has changed during COVID. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're talking to Eliza Feller of Saul Levinson and Brothers, Inc. Eliza, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
Absolutely.
Really, really great conversation, really important, and it's something that everyone should be thinking about in their head and maybe talking about, or certainly talking about with their family. Before we get back to funeral pre-planning, let's chat about the grieving process. Obviously, during the pandemic, you can't be close. I know you were doing some remote types of services, but overall, in the last 16 to 18 months, has the grieving process changed?
Yes, it's certainly gotten more complicated in general. The past few months have gotten better. The initial first few months, everything in life was so traumatic, but add grief on top of that and not being able to gather in the traditional ways. Over the past 18 months, though, it's, I think communities have really worked very hard to find ways to innovate, to create other opportunities, to memorialize people, to create grief resources, and in a way make them more accessible to people. Because things like bereavement groups can be on Zoom now. And for people who are grieving, who may really be suffering, they can't always get out of their house. They may not want to be in person. The thought of driving somewhere and being around strangers could be a barrier to being involved in grief support events. But sitting in your house, being able to just turn on a video really makes things much easier for people. And another thing is, at least in the Jewish tradition, is people gather typically at someone's house after the funeral to provide support to the family. Now, we're back to people are gathering in person to some extent, but because we've introduced that virtual aspect to do Zoom, a lot of people are able to combine the two. So family members who live out of town who historically have not been able to be part of that Shiva or mourning experience are actually now being brought in conjunction with the in-person experience.
Yeah, I wonder, just having been a part of numerous Shivas, I wonder if it counts as a minion if you have someone coming in from Zoom. I don't know. We'll have to ask a rabbi.
It depends which rabbi you ask, actually. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and depends what sect of the faith, I guess, you are.
Exactly.
Eliza, let's get back to funeral planning, because there are a lot of things that go into the decisions that you make as a family, as an individual. What are some of the things that, if I come into your office, I should be prepared to talk about with you to kind of make some decisions?
One of the things that is big, it makes a real impact for your family, is actually just the background information that we get ahead of time. Just accumulating family names and some of the statistical information that's needed for paperwork saves the family a huge amount of time going to look for things like a social security number ahead of time. But the other things that are important to think about is what type of service you want. What is even the mood for the service? Is it more of a celebration of life? Is it more traditional? Is it very personalized in some way? And obviously casket, and if a cemetery requires a vault or cremation, and having that conversation, I'll go back to making sure your family is included in that, is understanding the impact of whatever service you choose on your family, not just what you want, but what will bring them the greatest comfort, because they're the ones who are actually going to experience the funeral.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's true. You're only going to experience from looking up. But what about selecting a site where you're going to be buried? Some people have family plots. That I would assume needs to be thought through as part of this process, in addition to casket and whether or not a vault is needed.
Right. So yes, that is an important decision to make, because you don't want your family again to have to make that decision at the time. Your funeral director will be able to talk to you about the various local options, because we all move around a lot these days. So not everyone has a family plot wherever they're living. Different cemeteries have different requirements. They're in different locations. Some of them you may just like the landscaping, or they're more accessible if your family moves. Maybe it's near an airport. There are a lot of considerations that go into that. Costs from one cemetery to another for both purchasing and opening the grave may vary greatly. And that decision does not need to be made before you make the funeral arrangements on an advanced planning basis. However, it is an important part of it because it can affect a lot of other things.
Yeah, I actually feel like it's more of being an event planner than it is being a funeral director. It's kind of like that balancing act. I mean, in a way, though some will be participating, some will in certain ways, but you're almost like an event planner. You're planning either a celebration, a remembrance, and there's orchestrations that have to happen behind the scenes. Am I missing something here?
It's funny you should mention that, because they actually did a study of backgrounds of where people come from, but also what skills are needed in this profession. And that is a big part of it. That compassion, empathy, obviously, but very detail oriented, very, having that event planning to be able to make suggestions about personalizing a service or what is going to happen in what order is a very important part of this job.
Yeah. It just strikes me as that would be a very important skill set to have. I guess last question, let's talk about prepaying or paying for the funeral. you have the option to prepay, and there are different, I don't know, tiers, categories. I don't know how to, like you buy the silver package or the, whatever package, but you have the ability, if you want, to prepay to wipe the slate clean, for your relatives. All they got to do is show up.
Absolutely. It makes a huge difference. As you can imagine, funerals are not inexpensive. There's no way around that. But your family not having to come up with this large sum of money is an incredible gift you can give them. Different funeral homes handle the prepayment process differently. So there are some places where you can just say, this is approximately what I want. Let's set aside X amount of money. And there are other places, here, we actually go through the specific requirements, and you have a very, line by line itemization. So you know exactly what the cost is. And when the time comes, your family gives us a call, and we already have everything written down. We start moving on things. We have a conversation with them that lasts about 20 minutes instead of them having to come back in, review everything, decide financially what would work best for them. It's a massive difference.
Yeah, I can imagine when everything's pre-planned, you just have to focus on grieving and getting through the moment. Eliza, it is always a pleasure chatting with you. This is such an important topic. I hope people really got a lot out of the conversation. We look forward to having you back again very soon.
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk again.
That wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. Don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow, this time for BRN Weekly. We'll have a very special guest, and we'll be taking a look at some of our best segments for the week. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.